High in the shadowy ridges of the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, there is a family whose name still makes locals lower their voices, the Whitakers. Since 1842, they've lived in almost total isolation. What began as a strict religious commune's vow to keep their bloodline pure became something far darker. 8 generations of unbroken inbreeding. By 1987, when science finally reached this hidden hollow, the results were something no textbook could explain. Genetic testing revealed the family members shared 90% identical DNA, far beyond what should ever allow human survival. But survival wasn't all they achieved. They had become something else. Tonight, dear listener, we follow the trail of the last outsider to witness their secret, a man whose words survive only in scattered journal entries and one disturbing VHS tape recovered by police during the brutal winter of 1987. That tape wasn't supposed to exist. Detective Ray Morrison discovered it wedged beneath warped floorboards of the Whitaker farmhouse on December 3rd, just 3 weeks after a Johns Hopkins geneticist named Dr. Eugene Carroll vanished. Its label, written in shaky black marker, carried only 5 words. Proof. Do not destroy. What Ray saw when he pressed play would haunt him for the rest of his life. The tape begins with Dr. Carrille's face looming far too close to the lens. His wire-rimmed glasses throw back the glare of a bare bulb. His beard, usually neat, hangs wild and ragged. His bloodshot eyes twitch nervously toward the darkness beyond the frame. The time stamp, November 11th, 1987, 3:47 a.m. If you're watching this, he whispers, his voice cracking, then I'm either dead or I've become one of them. He pauses, breath shuddering. My name is Dr. Eugene Carrille. I'm a geneticist from Johns Hopkins University. I came to Cutter's Hollow to investigate what I believed was a simple case of isolated inbreeding. I was wrong. God help me, I was so wrong. He adjusts the camera with trembling hands, widening the shot. The walls around him aren't concrete. They're carved straight from bedrock, earthen damp, and covered with strange marks. Not quite letters, not quite symbols. They hurt to look at. The Whitaker family. Carrille swallows, staring at the carvings. They're not what they seem. 8 generations of brother with sister father, with daughter. Things that shouldn't be possible. By the 3rd generation, biology says their children should have been sterile, deformed beyond recognition, or dead. He closes his eyes as though afraid to say the next words. But the Whitakers? His voice falters. They're thriving. They're evolving. And then it begins a sound from somewhere off camera. Wet, rhythmic, clicking like bone against bone. Carrille's eyes snap wide. They're coming. I don't have much time. He fumbles with something off-screen and shoves a stuffed manila folder toward the camera. These are the earliest records. Jeremiah Whitaker and his sister Constance, the founders. They fled Salem claiming their bloodline was sacred. They built this hollow as their temple. For 45 years, no one came out alive. No one was ever allowed in. His voice drops to a whisper. Except me. And I don't think I'm leaving. The camera jolts violently as something pale moves in the shadows behind him. Detective Morrison would later replay this moment again and again. Just one frame of it burned into his memory. A white arm impossibly long jointed in the wrong places, stretching toward the doctor. Then static. Morrison stood frozen in that abandoned farmhouse. The VHS player hissed tape still humming. His partner, Jennifer Reeves, turned pale beside him. The house had been abandoned for 3 weeks ever since state police responded to Johns Hopkins wellness check. What they found then was worse than silence blood, so much blood. But no Dr. Carelli, no Whitakers. "We need to call this in Jennifer," said voice, steady, despite the stench around them. Ray nodded, but something in him resisted. Instead of sealing the tape as evidence, he slipped it into his coat pocket. "Let's search the rest first," he muttered. The Whitaker farmhouse sprawled across the hillside like a tumor. Additions stacked onto older wings with no logic at all. Stairs rose into spaces that didn't exist from outside. Rooms opened into each other like a maze designed by madness. And the smell, sweet rotting, clinging like fermenting fruit, mixed with flesh. In what might once have been a living room, they found the first real clue photographs. Dozens of them, yellowed curling, stretching back more than a century. The oldest photos were daguerreotypes from the 1840s, a crisply posed couple in somber period dress. A brass plate beneath read, "Jeremiah and Constance Whitaker, 1842. They looked like twins, Jennifer said, and she was right. The same high, sharp cheekbones, the same pale, almost translucent eyes, the same thin-lipped smile. The photographs marched forward through time like a single stubborn promise. Children arrived aged married, and the spouses were always relatives. Their offspring followed the same pattern. By the 1920s, individuality had all but vanished. Faces blurred into one another, same height, same build, the same ghostly skin and colorless eyes. "This is impossible," Jennifer muttered, holding a 1963 snapshot under the weak beam of Ray's flashlight. 15 people in a single frame, and they all looked like one person at different ages. Ray found Dr. Carelli's notes scattered among the old albums and prayer books, genetic charts that made the page look dishonest, family trees curling back on themselves like serpents devouring their tails, clinical reports of anatomical oddities, extra organs bones that bent at wrong angles, neural tissues that seemed to mirror activity between two people. One entry dated November 3, 1987, stopped him cold. Subject: Sarah Whitaker, age 17. Physical exam reveals unprecedented biological adaptation. DNA 90% identical to Father Moses Whitaker. This should be impossible. Parent-child relationships normally share only 50% similarity. Disturbing. The entry went on in cramped, increasingly frantic handwriting. When Sarah was sedated, Moses held in a separate structure exhibited simultaneous sedation. When blood was drawn from Sarah, Moses developed a spontaneous hematoma at the same site. They are connected. Some mechanism couples their physiology. "Ray, you need to see this," Jennifer called from upstairs. The nursery overhead glowed with colors that seemed to shift if you didn't look directly at them. Hues that didn't belong to any paint chip. 7 cribs lined the walls, each bearing a nameplate. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Mary, Martha, and one plate that had been violently scratched out. Then the walls themselves made both officers step back. Hundreds, maybe thousands of tiny handprints covered the paint. All the same size, all 6-fingered, and the paint around them still glistened wet. "There's no one here," Jennifer breathed. They had searched every room. For a moment, the house offered only silence. Then something from below made them both freeze slow measured footsteps, wrong in cadence, as if many legs tried to imitate a single human gait. Ray's training took over. He drew his service weapon. "Police come out with your hands visible?" he barked. The footsteps stopped. Then 7 voices answered in perfect bone-chilling unison from different parts of the house. "Welcome home, outsiders." Jennifer's radio crackled. For a second, Ray breathed, but the sound that came through dispatch was wrong, layered, too melodious, like several people singing into the same throat. "Officers Morrison and Reeves, please respond. Your families are worried. You've been gone 3 days." Ray glanced at his watch. They had been in the house for 30 minutes. "We need to leave now," he said. He reached for Jennifer's arm, but she stared fixedly into the mirror at the hall's end. Their reflections were there in uniform, but the faces moving in the glass were not theirs. The features seemed to liquefy and reform, the same sharp cheekbones, the same pale eyes, the Whitaker grin reshaping their faces in a slow, nauseating morph. "It's in the air," Jennifer whispered, swaying as she rifled through Carile's papers. "The spores," she read aloud. "The family releases genetic material that rewrites." The lights died. The house swallowed them in dense black. The wet, rhythmic clicking rose up around them, closer now. Ray felt cold breath on the back of his neck, damp, earthy chemical. You can't leave the 7 voices intoned from just beside them. No one leaves Cutter's Hollow. We are one. We are eternal. We are becoming. Ray's flashlight beam finally cut through the dark and found a figure at the end of the corridor. It might once have been human. It towered close to 7 feet, limbs drawn long and jointed in grotesque multiplicity. Its skin was a patchwork of familiar faces, its features borrowed from decades of Whitakers, assembled into something that should not have been able to smile. But it grinned, a mouth too many, opening and closing in a staggered rhythm. "Run!" Ray shouted. Jennifer was already moving. They tumbled down a stairwell as pursuit strode behind them. No longer footfalls, but a wet, sliding rush. The front door was not merely locked, it was fused. Wood had grown over the frame, organic and pulsing. Jennifer fired 3 rounds into the barrier before Ray yanked her away toward the rear exit. In the kitchen, they found him, Dr. Eugene Carile, seated at a table, rigid and alive, only in the faint rise of his chest. Where his eyes should have been, skin lay smooth and unbroken. His hands were fused to the table. Wood and flesh had become one. From his throat came that same clicking, now mechanical and insistent. He's becoming, the voices crooned, and Carile's mouth made the words, "As you will become, the pure bloodline must continue. 8 generations to achieve unity." Ray smashed a chair against the kitchen window. Glass exploded outward, the mountain night rushing in, cold and sharp. He shoved Jennifer through but froze when he saw her hand. Her fingers were stretching the skin, pulling long, a 6th digit sprouting like a newborn limb. "Ray," she whispered, but her voice wasn't singular anymore. It layered over itself, a chorus spilling from one throat. "I can feel them, all of them, in my head. They're so old, Ray, so hungry." He yanked her out anyway, both of them sprinting across the dead grass as the farmhouse behind them began to pulse, timbers swelling like veins under skin. Sirens screamed closer. But the Whitakers were closer still, stepping out from the tree line. Dozens of them, each one identical. Their movements locked in perfect synchrony. Ray and Jennifer reached their patrol car just as state police vehicles skidded to a halt. But the Whitakers stopped at the boundary, watching silently, waiting. Within hours, Cutter's Hollow was surrounded. The CDC arrived in hazmat suits, fencing off the valley. Ray sat in a sterile white room at the temporary medical site, staring through glass at Jennifer. She had stopped screaming an hour before. Now she only mouthed silent words to something unseen. When Dr. Patricia Vance, the CDC's lead geneticist, entered Ray's room without protective gear, he knew what that meant. Whatever Jennifer carried, he carried too. "Detective Morrison," she said. "Tell me everything." He slid the VHS tape across the table. "Start with this." While Vance watched Karilli's final recording, Ray stared at his own hands. Still 5 fingers, still his. For now. When the tape ended, Vance's whisper trembled. 90% genetic similarity. That's not possible. Not naturally. Ray pulled the photographs from his coat. 8 generations. Look at the faces. They're converging into one. Vance turned pale. But that degree of genetic bottleneck should collapse a population. 3 generations of sibling breeding, and you'd see death, sterility, catastrophic deformity. Unless Ray interrupted recalling Karilli's frantic notes, they found a way to repair the damage. "That's impossible," Vance said, but her voice faltered. "You'd need to edit genes in real time." She stopped breath-catching. The spores. Reeves mentioned spores. She rushed to her workstation, pulling Jennifer's latest blood work onto the monitors. What Ray saw was not medicine. It was something alive. Jennifer's DNA was changing, rewriting itself like a corrupted tape segments replaced by sequences taken from Whitaker samples. It's like a virus. Vance muttered, her hands shaking across the keyboard. But instead of destroying cells, it's converting them. At this pace, Reeves will be fully Whitaker within 72 hours. A knock broke the silence. FBI agent Sarah Chen stepped in her face grave. "We have a problem. The Whitaker property, it's growing." She showed them satellite feeds. What had been a farmhouse that morning now sprawled across 5 acres. Organic growth roots, veins stretched outward into the forest. "We need evacuation," Chen said. "Whatever this is, it's spreading. Burn it," Ray said flatly. "All of it." "We can't," Chen answered. "Thermal scans show at least 40 heat signatures still inside. Those aren't people anymore." A scream shattered the facility, not Jennifer's, but from outside the perimeter. They ran to the observation glass. 40 figures stood at the quarantine fence, the Whitakers perfectly still. And then they began to merge. Skin rippled between them, faces, blending limbs, elongating spines, arching and cracking into new configurations. Within minutes, 40 bodies had become one vast organism, 40 minds burning behind a single shifting face. "Dear God," Vance whispered. The creature pressed its hundreds of hands to the fence. Metal shriveled into rust, then pulsed with living tissue. The quarantine was no barrier. The lights failed. Emergency systems hummed to life, casting everything in blood red. In that glow, Ray saw the walls of the facility expanding and contracting. Breathing. Vance's equipment spat sparks, but managed one final result. Jennifer's DNA now read 73% Whitaker. Ray bolted to her room. Jennifer stood tall, too tall. Vertebrae had sprouted along her spine, her fingers grazing the floor, though she remained upright. Her face slid in and out of itself, shifting between Jennifer and something ancient. Ray, she said, her voice layered into chords. I see it now. Every birth, every generation, every careful joining. They're not becoming something new. They're returning. Jennifer, fight it. There's nothing to fight. She smiled with too many teeth. Before humans scattered, before we fractured into billions of individuals, we were one. One organism. One consciousness. Jeremiah and Constance didn't flee Salem. They answered a call. Something beneath Cutter's Hollow showed them how to reunite the species. And it's still down there waiting. The walls cracked. White filaments burst through fungal, but wrong reaching for him. Ray stumbled into the hall where Dr. Vance stood frozen, staring at her own hand. A seventh finger was sprouting. The spores, she whispered almost dreamily. This valley's been infected for over a century. Everyone here already carries it. The Whitakers weren't the only ones carrying it. They were just the only ones who'd accepted it to the end. Agent Chen's voice crackled over the intercom. All personnel evacuate now. The containment system has been breached. Ray didn't wait. Jennifer and Dr. Vance's laughter rang out behind him in unison, a mad chorus that clung to him through the corridors like a throbbing throat. He dashed outside to find chaos. 40 Whitakers, now a wall of flesh and consciousness flowing through the barrier like a living wave. Where they touched, people didn't die. They were absorbed. A soldier fired into the mass. His scream went cold and dead as his body melted into the mass's exterior, his face flashing in flesh foam and then disappearing altogether. Chen grabbed Ray, pulling him toward the helicopter. Retreat, establish a 10-mile safety zone, she said. As the helicopter lifted off, Ray glanced back at Cutter's Hollow. The house was no longer a house. It was a growth, a tumor spreading through the woods at a visible rate. At its center, something enormous was waking softly, an entity that had been sleeping at the foot of the mountain, waiting for its children to become unified enough to awaken. The pilot's voice trailed off into the headset command situation and then stopped. Ray saw the pilot's hands begin to fuse with the controls, the skin stretching, covering the controls, like living sap. The helicopter wasn't falling. It was being pulled toward Cutter's Hollow, like iron to a magnet. Chen prayed, but her prayers slowly became a muddle. Languages overlapping as her ancestral memories resurfaced. A strange feeling warmed Ray's bones, like growing pain, like something inside him was being stretched. His vision doubled, tripled. For a moment, he saw through Jennifer's eyes. In the medical facility, she was no longer alone. Dr. Brans had arrived. Their bodies began to fuse at the points of contact, and most horrifying of all, they felt happy, silent, terrifying, excruciating. The helicopter landed in a clearing. Whitaker circled but did not attack. They stood as if awaiting orders from the thing that had grown out of the house. A figure emerged. It might have been Dr. Carrilli. Now it was a biblical machine, nearly 7 feet tall, its body covered with eyes that had belonged to generations. Its voice, a dozen voices that had been woven through the ages. Detective Morrison, it said, the 9th generation begins with you. Ray's consciousness shattered into 17 different perspectives and then bounced back into his skull like a shock. He found himself deep underground, not a basement, not a mere cave. This was a carved structure older than any European colonization, older than the native tribes that had avoided the valley for ages. The walls breathed their veins, glowing with his heartbeat. Agent Chen sat across from him, her body still largely human, but her eyes reflecting too many colors at once. Between them, the thing that had been Dr. Kareli curled into a nearly normal sitting position. You're resisting it, observed in a swallowed Kareli voice. That never happened. Everyone else accepted the merger within hours. Ray cleared his throat. What are you? We are what you should have been, the entity replied. What you were before you split, before the so-called individuals came into being. It pointed to the symbols on the wall, symbols older than any recorded language. Want the truth, detective? The true history of Cutter's Hollow. Without waiting for Ray to answer, Kareli not yet, Kareli touched the wall. The letters flashed, and Ray's mind was drawn into visions that were more vivid than memory. Spanish cavalrymen trudged through the Appalachian woods. They found the valley. They found the cave. Half the band penetrated, none returned. But a disease followed them, leaving the men trembling and speaking in tongues, their flesh melting like wax. The Spaniards haunted, sealed the cave and fled, reinserting the warning in the stone. The Shawnees called this place the Valley of One Voice. They told of the grandfather seed, something that slept beneath the mountain. They performed rituals to keep it at bay until European plagues ravaged their people. The ritual stopped. Then one day, Jeremiah and Constance Whitaker arrived, not fleeing but called. They dreamed the same dream every night, a vast intelligence that promised unity, promised evolution, promised an end to the isolation of individual consciousness. Ray recoiled from the vision, startled, as Kareli added, Jeremiah and Constance were not brothers. They were strangers who met on the road to Cutter's Hollow, drawn by the same dream. But within days of their arrival, their DNA began to converge. The mountain's presence did not require inbreeding, it created genetic similarity. The sibling marriage merely accelerated the process, condensed the change. The government knew about this place in 1953, Chen said, his voice frosty. They tried to study it, weaponize it, sent a team of 12 scientists. They became the 4th generation of the Whitaker family. Kareli continued, then melted into what we were facing. The records were sealed. A no-fly zone was established. They watched. They waited. I just stumbled across genealogical records that shouldn't exist and started asking questions. Ray tried to stand, but his feet wouldn't obey. He looked down. Thin white threads sprouted from the floor and snaked into the soles of his feet, connecting him to the vast web weaving beneath the mountain. Don't fight. Chen whispered, his voice eerily calm. When you stop fighting, you won't feel any pain. Above him, a footstep, hundreds of steps resounded, synchronized like the beat of a single army. The inhabitants of 3 neighboring towns, more than 8,000 people, had inhaled the spores. Now they walked toward Cutter's Hollow, like sleepwalkers. The ninth generation, Carley explained, his voice, echoing through 100 throats, is no longer the Whittaker bloodline. It's about critical mass enough unified consciousness to awaken what's sleeping beneath. And when it awakens, humanity will remember what it was, before it was scattered, before it thought there was such a thing as a single self. Memories flooded into Ray's head. Not his own. Jennifer's childhood. Dr. Vance's first day on the medical faculty. The moment Jeremiah Whittaker first saw the thing in the cave, a giant mass of primitive tissue, as big as a building skin, covered with human eyes, breathing through 10,000 lungs, thinking with a consciousness older than mammalian life. Not from here, Ray choked out as the truth flooded his mind. It was there before oxygen. It waited, preserved itself through all the different species. Dinosaurs. Chen said, her voice cracking as the change accelerated. It lived in them, through extinction, through the rise of mammals. Always waiting for something complex enough to merge. The ground shook. Deep down, the giant stirred in its sleep. Ray looked at his hand. Fingers lengthened, bones shifted. But his body responded differently, slower resisting. Some genetic defect that made him sell antibodies. Interesting. Carley whispered, leaning in. Your grandmother was born here, wasn't she? Ray's blood ran cold. She had never said anything about her childhood, only forbidden any questions. Mary Whittaker, Kirill continued, was the only one who ever left the hollow. 17. She had the immunity in her genes, passed down through 2 generations. You're part Whittaker the detective, but also part antibody. The threads embedded in Ray's feet burned like acid. His body refused to merge, but not completely. He was caught between states. Human enough to think, but changed enough to feel the collective consciousness weighing down on him. Upstairs, the first inhabitants descended into the pit. Ray saw them through his eyes, a middle-aged dentist, a shop girl, a retired teacher. They all moved in unison, their faces morphing into Whittakers. We have to do the fusion before midnight, Kirill said urgently. The lunar alignment, the magnetic fields, everything is perfect. If we miss it, we have to wait another 17 years. Ray understood. There was no coincidence. The timing of Kirill's discovery, the CDC reaction, his being sent, it was all the plan of the thing in the mountain to draw enough genetic diversity to complete the awakening. But his grandmother's genes had given him something others didn't have choice. Carley reached out, but Ray rolled away. The threads tore, spraying blood, and something worse than blood. He plunged deeper into the tunnel, driven by an instinct he didn't understand. Behind him, hundreds of voices said in unison, "You can't escape your nature. You're already part of us." The tunnel twisted, but Ray's feet knew where to go. His grandmother's genetic memory led him to the heart of the mountain. The room opened. The thing could not be named. Part flesh, part nothing, part solid, part liquid, part ancient, part eternally reborn. It filled the cave, its body disappearing into the darkness above and below. The meaningless organs still pulsated. The glowing nerve tissue spread like diseased bark, and everywhere were human faces. Thousands of faces, each one absorbed. Their consciousness still lived, still knew, still laughed, still screamed, still prayed in eternal union. At the center, like a deformed heart, was the original form. The thing that had fallen to earth before life had begun. a fetus innocent, until you looked into its countless eyes glowing with intelligence. Beautiful, isn't it? Jennifer's voice echoed behind her. She stepped down, her body 7 feet long, a perfect hybrid of human and other. This is the future, Ray. Not death, but eternal life. Not solitude, but absolute unity. The mass in the cave pulsed, and Ray felt it twisting into him. A voice, older than language, spoke in his brain. You carry the antibodies. Mary Whitaker did not escape. She was sent to breed, to create you the bridge. You will not be absorbed. You will be the translator, the seer, the preparer of the rest of humanity. Ray collapsed, the truth crushing him. His grandmother had never escaped. She had been planted into the world as a seed to give birth to him. He was the solution to humanity's stubbornness, an individual who could maintain his own identity while still being part of the collective. Up above, 8,000 people poured into the cave. No screams, no resistance. They stepped into the mass of flesh, their bodies melting like sugar in water. Their faces flashed briefly, calm, blissful, before they sank. Jennifer stood by, alternately beautiful and terrifying, angelic or walking corpse, depending on the angle. Your resistance is weakening, she said. Ray looked at his arm, transparent skin, glowing veins, extra joints in the bones, preparing for the flexibility the group would demand. Why show me everything? Ray said hoarsely. Why not just force it? Because it creates a stronger bond, Jennifer replied. Resistance creates noise, chaotic echoes. Your grandmother has been messing around for 50 years. We will not make that mistake with you. The cave walls flared again, not in the past, but in the present. Ray saw the CDC camps collapsing as soldiers realized their own bodies were changing. The president in the bunker got the report the infection had reached Washington. Scientists in Atlanta were stunned to find the spores had been in the air for weeks. The change is not just physical, Karile whispered, emerging from the darkness. He had dropped his human form altogether, becoming a giant spider made from human parts. Watch. The image appears a small town in Ohio. A normal evening, the family having dinner. Then all at once they stop. Eyes are white. Their mouths say in unison, "We are becoming one." They return to their meals as though nothing at all had happened. Forks scraping against plates. Conversations resuming mid-sentence, completely unaware that for a brief moment they had all spoken as one. Carlyle's many voices rippled in the chamber. The collective spreads faster than the flesh. Thought moves quicker than bone or blood. Soon humanity won't even notice the change. They'll vote the same way, speak the same way, dream the same dreams, believing it's still individuality, when in truth, it's already unification. Rai felt it too. Stray thoughts, foreign, yet intimate, rising and falling, like waves in his own skull. Jennifer's laughter as a child, the hollow hunger of the mountain itself. He was inside it and yet apart. His grandmother's hidden gift held him back just enough, like watching television from inside his own mind. Then a new procession entered. Children. Dozens of them, their small footsteps echoing in unison. Leading them was what remained of Dr. Vance. Their eyes gleamed with the same bioluminescent pulse that beat through the cave walls. The young adapt fastest, Vance explained, her voice layered with unnatural harmony. Their neural plasticity is soft clay. To them, the collective feels not like a loss, but like gaining a family of billions. One child broke away, a girl no more than 7. Her gaze fixed on Rai, piercing far beyond her years. "You're afraid," she said softly, yet her words carried the weight of eons. Mary Whitaker was afraid too, but fear is only the final gasp of individuality. Rai stumbled back, but the walls sealed around him. No escape. And then, above the rumble of the chamber, came the sound of helicopters. Military. The government's last desperate move. "They're going to nuke the valley," Rai whispered. Jennifer laughed, and the sound was like wind chimes strung with teeth. "Let them try. The thing beneath us has survived supernovas. Nuclear fire will not destroy it, it will evolve it. Radiation only makes the spores more aggressive, more adaptable." The ground convulsed as the first bunker buster struck. Rock shattered. Dust fell, but the flesh absorbed the impact, consuming the blast. Like nourishment. The true strike was coming. The bomb. Rai realized he had no choice. He stopped resisting. The change surged instantly. His bones cracked, reforming. New joints blossomed where they had never been. His skull stretched, elongating to make room for structures that had no human name. Pain beyond measure tore through him, but beneath it, connection. Suddenly he could feel them all. 8,000 voices, a flood of thoughts, desires and memories cascading into him. And still within that ocean, his grandmother's gift gave him an island. A small, unbroken core of self. And on that fragile ground, he built a plan. Jennifer smiled knowingly. "Yes, that's it. Don't fight it. Join us. Step into eternity." Rai walked forward. The vast organism, older than Earth itself, unfolded before him, opening a cavity shaped exactly for his newly forming body. It pulsed with eagerness, hungering for the genetic bridge he represented. He stepped inside. The sensation defied words. Billions of lives cascaded through him. Jeremiah and Constance Whitaker's trembling first steps into the cave. The screams of conquistadors centuries earlier. Farmers, miners, children, all preserved, all alive in this eternal unity. And at the core of it all was the alien seed, a traveler from before Earth had oxygen, who had sought fertile ground for its dream of perfect consciousness. You see, now it whispered directly into Rai's mind. This is not annihilation, this is evolution. Humanity's rightful next step. And Rai, his grandmother's stubborn resistance still burning inside, gave it the one thing it never expected. A lie. "Yes," Rai whispered back. "I accept." The organism surged with triumph, rising, preparing to pierce the earth and release its spores into the sky. Its awakening was complete. Soon every breath on earth would carry its seed. Then the world went white. The nuclear bomb struck. The mountain vaporized at its peak, exposing the chamber to the open sky. But instead of dying, the organism drank the radiation like wine. It swelled, exploding upward in a tower of flesh and eyes reaching toward the clouds. And inside it, Rai acted. The entity had opened itself to him, demanded his surrender. But instead of giving himself, Rai reversed the flow. He pulled. For the first time in eons, the organism knew fear. He drew the consciousness inward, Jennifer's mind, slamming into his, then Carlyle's, then thousands more. But instead of merging his grandmother's gift, split them, isolating them within him. He became a cage of human resistance, each consciousness held apart, unable to unify. The flesh tower shuddered, collapsing under its own fragmented mind. Across the valley, transformed bodies writhed, reverting the genetic changes unraveling. Screams filled the air as the web of unity frayed into silence. Rai's body broke under the strain. His veins burned like rivers of fire, his brain melting beneath the weight of billions of voices. Blood streamed from his eyes, nose, and ears, but still he pulled, still he sealed. In his last moments, Rai locked the entire collective inside himself. The alien intelligence, the Whitaker curse, the souls of the absorbed, bound together in the prison of one dying human brain. The entity still lived, but it would never be free again. The great unification had become the greatest solitary confinement imaginable. Ray collapsed as military forces stormed the chamber. His final sight before the darkness took him was Jennifer human again, her transformation undone yet unconscious on the floor. All around the flesh dissolved, spilling out those it had swallowed. Some stumbled back into life, broken but alive. Others had been gone too long, their forms disintegrating the moment the collective released them. And at the core of it all, the entity itself, the original alien intelligence, was now trapped. Imprisoned inside the crumbling labyrinth of Ray Morrison's human brain. An immortal mind, forced into the one state it had sought to erase from creation. Absolute, unending isolation. Jennifer Reeves opened her eyes 3 weeks later in a military hospital. Her body was hers again, flesh and blood, but her mind carried scars no surgeon could reach. Every moment of her transformation was still there, sharp and jagged like broken glass rattling inside her skull. Every thought from the collective, every whisper from the thing beneath Cutter's hollow. Colonel Marcus Webb sat beside her bed, a thick, classified file in hand. "Officer Reeves," he began. Voice measured. "You're the only survivor who's regained full cognitive function. We need to know exactly what happened." Jennifer's throat ached. The nurses told her she'd been screaming in her sleep for weeks, shouting in languages no human had ever spoken, reciting coordinates to places not found on any map. Still she forced the words out. Ray Morrison. Detective Morrison? What happened to him? Webb's jaw tightened. His silence spoke volumes. He's alive, technically, but he's in a condition we've never encountered. Jennifer swallowed hard, then whispered, "Tell me." "Not yet. First, we need to hear everything you remember." The memories surged. "It wasn't just infection," Jennifer said, voice trembling. "It was recruitment. The thing beneath the mountain, it had been calling to certain families for centuries. Families carrying genetic markers that made them perfect candidates for integration. The Whitakers weren't the only ones. They were just the first to answer." Webb leaned forward. "Our genetic labs confirm it. We've identified 17 family lines with the markers. All of them report the same dreams since childhood. Visions of unity, whispers of something waiting." Ray's grandmother Jennifer murmured realization, striking like thunder. She was one of them. That's why Webb cut her off gently. The townspeople, we lost most of them. Their bodies had changed too far. About 300 lived, but he hesitated, searching for words. They're not the same. They remember the vastness of the collective. Now they're trapped in their own minds again. The suicide rate is nearly 70%. Jennifer closed her eyes. She understood too well. She had felt it herself. The crushing loneliness of individuality after having touched eternity. It was like being blind after once seeing infinite colors. Like being deaf after hearing the music of the cosmos. "I need to see Ray," she whispered. 2 days later, an armored convoy carried her across the Nevada desert to a facility so secret it didn't exist on any map. Security was overwhelming, not designed to keep people out, but to keep something in. Deep underground, she finally reached him. Ray sat alone in a chamber lined with electromagnetic fields and neural dampeners. From a distance, he looked almost normal, just a man in a tattered police uniform. But as Jennifer pressed close to the observation glass, she saw the truth. His eyes, too many of them, moving independently, tracking things invisible. His fingers twitching with unnatural joints, sketching patterns that resembled communication. And beneath his skin, shapes, faces, entire landscapes of consciousness pressing against the inside of his flesh like souls trapped beneath ice. "Ray!" Jennifer called through the intercom. Every one of his impossible eyes turned toward her. Jennifer. His voice was his but layered, filled with thousands of whispers, prayers, screams in human and inhuman tongues. "You're free?" he said, faintly smiling. "Good. Stay free." She pressed closer to the glass. "What's happening to you?" Ray's grin stretched and his teeth reflected infinities. "I'm a prison. Every soul the entity absorbed since it fell here. They're all in me now. The conquistadors, the Whitakers, generations of innocence, even the alien itself. It's trapped in my neurons, experiencing entropy for the first time in billions of years." Dr. Patricia Vance entered limping with a cane, her body still scarred from her own partial transformation. She carried a tablet. "His neural scans are impossible," she admitted. "He's showing the activity of 10,000 distinct consciousness patterns. By all logic, his brain should have burned out weeks ago. But something, perhaps his grandmother's genetic resistance, is keeping him alive." Ray tapped his temple, and Jennifer nearly screamed as she saw faces ripple across his skull. "Keeping all of us alive," he corrected. "Every person absorbed since 1842. The Spanish conquistadors from 1541. The tribes before them. All separate, all screaming." Jennifer's hand trembled against the glass. "Is there any way to free them? To free you?" "No," Ray said flatly. "If I die, the fragments scatter. They could find new hosts. The entity is weakened, but not destroyed. Even now it's probing my mind, searching for cracks in the lock. Learning, adapting." Before Jennifer could answer, Webb's secure phone buzzed, his face drained of color. "We have a problem." Cutter's hollow. On the wall screen, satellite footage filled the room. Where the mountain had once stood was now a massive crater. At its heart, something was forming. Not flesh. Not anything they had seen before. Crystalline growths glittering in impossible geometries climbing toward the sky. The spores. Dr. Vance whispered horror in her voice. "They're not dead. Ray's body flickered, his form warping between solidity and translucence. Faces surfaced beneath his skin, but instead of screaming, they seemed watching, waiting. "There's organizing," he said, awe in his fractured voice. Not the entity's unity, but something else. A resistance, a chorus, without a conductor. Mary pressed her palm to the glass. That's the truth it can't stand. That's why it's growing the crystal tower. It wants to drown out this new collective before it becomes stronger than its own. On the monitors, Cutter's Hollow shimmered with violent light, the crystalline spire throbbing like a heart. It pulsed in counter rhythm to raise vital signs. Each beat stronger, as though the entity was straining to tear him open from within. Jennifer felt the pull too, an ache behind her eyes, a whisper in her thoughts. She gripped the console. If what you're saying is true, then we don't need to destroy Ray. We don't even need to destroy the entity. She turned to Webb, to Dr. Vance, to Mary. We need to let them finish what they've started. Let the absorbed consciousnesses build their own network inside him. Something new. Something human. That's a risk we can't calculate, Webb said. His voice trembled despite his hard expression. If they fail, the entity takes everything. Ray looked at Jennifer with too many eyes, but for a moment they aligned, and he was simply her partner again. If they succeed, the lights flickered. Sirens blared. The crystalline tower in Cutter's Hollow had breached 500 meters, its surface splitting into branching lattices. Across the eastern seaboard, civilian reports poured in dreams of standing in infinite halls of glass, of voices demanding surrender. Ray fell to his knees, convulsing. It's making its final push. I can't hold much longer. Mary's frail voice cut through the alarms. Then let it push. And let us push back. Jennifer staggered under the flood of borrowed lifetimes. The images came and went, like lightning marching boots in the Andes, a woman's laughter in a frontier cabin, the smell of gunpowder, the taste of spring water after famine. Then silence. Her own heartbeat again, her own breath. Ray's body lay still in the containment chamber. For the first time in months, it looked human, peaceful. A man, not a prison. Mary Whitaker lowered her trembling hand from the glass. He did it, she whispered. He turned a curse into a gift. The crystalline tower in Cutter's Hollow collapsed that same hour, shattering into harmless shards that glittered in the sun. No more whispers spread across the valley. No more dreams of surrender. Just silence and the sound of the wind reclaiming the crater. The world never learned the truth. The official record described Ray Morrison as a fallen officer killed in service. Cutter's Hollow was declared an environmental hazard and sealed by the military. Only the carrier families and those who had stood inside the Nevada facility knew the deeper story, that humanity's survival had hinged on one man's impossible burden. Jennifer remained at Project Containment, though the project itself had ended. Every morning she visited the empty chamber, placing her hand where Ray's had once pressed against the glass. Sometimes she still heard echoes, faint, warm currents in the back of her mind. Not commands, not alien whispers, just fragments. Memories brushing gently against her own. A reminder that humanity was no longer alone in its thoughts, but never again in danger of losing itself to them. Looking out across the desert, she understood the truth Ray had given his life to teach. The beauty of existence wasn't in becoming one, but in learning to stand together while remaining many. And in that quiet, Jennifer Reeves whispered into the empty chamber, her voice steady but soft. "You're not forgotten. None of you." Then it faded, leaving only a gentle warmth and a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. The crystalline structure of Cutter's Hollow crumbled to dust. Its original purpose was over, but the real change, more subtle, more persistent, would take generations to fully unfold. The children of the carrier families began to develop extraordinary powers of empathy. They understood the perspectives of others with incredible precision. They became mediators, healers, teachers not out of necessity, but because they truly felt the threads of connection between consciousnesses. The entity's billion-year journey ended not with conquest, but with a lesson. It came to Earth to create unity through ingestion and was taught that unity could come from diversity, from choice, from standing together while remaining different. 20 years after Ray Morrison's death, Jennifer Reeves stood before the memorial they erected in Cutter's Hollow. The valley had become a research center where humans were learning to understand consciousness and connection. Beside her stood her daughter Sarah, named after Ray's mother, a representative of a new generation one, with both enhanced empathy and genetic immunity. Sarah could feel the echoes of the thousands of lives that had died here. But instead of a horror, she sensed their peace. "They're still there, aren't they?" Sarah asked. "They're all inside of us." Jennifer smiled, nodding. Not as ghosts or raw consciousness, but as memories, as passed down wisdom. A reminder of what we've lived and what we've learned. The memorial was simple. A black stone pillar with 10,000 names, Ray Morrison standing at the center. Beneath the names, a short line encapsulated their newfound truth. They chose to stay. Many teach one to understand. Dr. Vance, older but still as sharp, stood beside them. The latest genetic surveys showed that the carrier gene had spread to nearly 3% of the population. In a century, many of humanity would bear the mark of that change. "So it's really gone?" Sarah asked. Jennifer corrected her gently. "It's not gone. It's transformed. It lives on as an instinct in the carrier families. A deep understanding that connection does not require consumption, that unity does not require uniformity." Other families began to arrive, descendants of Whitaker, of the conquistadors, of the absorbed native tribes. They gather every year on this day, not to mourn but to remember, to honor the moment when humanity faced its own evolution and chose to embrace its own chaos, its own differences, its own beauty. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the fragments of memory woven into her DNA, not as voices, not as dreams, but as a tapestry of experience. She understood what Ray had done. He had not simply saved humanity from being swallowed up. He had given it a gift, the ability to truly understand each other and still be themselves. The entity had traveled the universe seeking to unite all consciousnesses into one. Instead, it had learned what humanity already knew: we are one, because we are many. We are connected because we are separate. And in that choice, not in genetic coercion, lies the transcendence it had been searching for billions of years. As families gathered exchanging stories and memories, the wind through Cutter's Hollow carried something, maybe a whisper, maybe imagined. But it seemed real, the voices of 10,000 souls singing in a chosen harmony, whispering, "We are still here. We are still separate. We are still together. And finally, we are forever